Hey, everybody, welcome into the 14. I'm Nick Cole, and I'm here with Christopher Smith, and we are breaking down every SEC matchup in week 2 from a betting perspective. Today, we're talking about Texas A&M taking a road trip to Colorado to play the Buffaloes. This game's on Saturday, September 11th, with a 3:30 Eastern kickoff at Empower Field at Mile High in Denver, Colorado. The game's going to be on Fox, one of the rare SEC games on Fox this season. From a betting standpoint, this game opened at Texas A&M minus 17, and it's held firm there so far. The Aggies are still favored by 17 points. And then the over-under opened at 52.5 and has dropped to 50.5 as of this video. So, Christopher, bringing you in as our gambling expert, what do you make of those early numbers?
Yeah, I'm loving this matchup. I've been to watch games in both of these places, and Texas A&M is a great place to watch a game. Denver, and I lived there a few times, and whether you're in Boulder on the home campus of CU or you're in Denver itself at the Broncos Stadium, two great places to watch games as well. So I'll be watching it from my couch, but hopefully we can find a way to make you some money on this game if you're watching at home or if you're going to the game, either way. But Nick, why don't you get into Nick's news and notes and tell us what to be looking out for in terms of the headlines around these two programs?
Yeah, sure. Well, let's start first with weather and injuries, right? I've got a little bit of a shock for some people on this weather forecast, but the high in Denver on Saturday is going to be 92 degrees, which is higher than most of the SEC kickoffs down here in the South. So there will be a little bit of a heat factor up at the high elevation. No real rain or wind concerns, though. Should be sunny. That's an afternoon kick there, so we should expect to be near those high temperatures for the majority of that game. From an injury standpoint, Texas A&M has a couple of things to look for. Wide receiver Ezekiel Jones' shoulder is still out indefinitely, and then you've got this is a suspension, but defensive lineman McKinley Jackson is out for Saturday's game against Colorado. On the Colorado side, the major one that most SEC fans are going to be familiar with is former Tennessee quarterback JT Shrout, who went to Colorado to presumably be their quarterback. Is out for the year with a knee injury, so we won't be seeing him on Saturday. In terms of the notes for this game, I want to first go back to week 1 and look at what we got from Texas A&M. And if you were betting this game like I was, I would consider a miraculous cover. The Aggies were 29-point favorites against Kent State at Kyle Field, and they ended up winning the game 41-10. And so you say, oh, okay, yeah, 31-point cover. We all felt really good about that. Yeah, well, if you were watching and sweating that game at the end of the evening like I was, you'd know that Kent State was inside the Texas A&M 10-yard line twice late in the fourth quarter of a blowout game and elected to try to kick field goals from 4th and goal both times and missed both kicks, one to the left, one to the right. So the gambling gods must have been with us in that game to bring the Aggies the win there and the cover. But looking at Texas A&M just from a non-betting standpoint in that game, the good news, they totaled up 595 yards of offense against a bad defense from Kent State. But the bad news is, Haynes King is his debut as sort of the starting quarterback for Texas A&M, threw 3 interceptions against a MAC opponent. And that's a little bit of a concern, even though he got the dreaded vote of confidence from his coaching staff this week. And then if you look on the other side of this from Colorado, they won their opener 35-7 against Northern Colorado. And I just don't know how impressive that was. I think you've got a little bit more thoughts on that. But they were debuting a freshman quarterback against an FCS opponent and took care of business, but they didn't cover that alternate spread there. And it may actually be a warning sign for those who are thinking about betting the Buffaloes this weekend. Christopher, what are you thinking about this game from a betting standpoint?
Yeah, I love that you pointed out Sean Lewis was coaching the final minutes of that game last week in College Station as if getting a field goal was life or death for him, but it didn't work out. I think some of those boosters are probably happy after paying Jimbo Fisher yet another big contract extension. Get some of that money maybe back in their pocket with some luck from the football gods. But you look at Colorado, and if people don't remember this, Carl Durrell took the job in the COVID year last year, very, very, very late in the cycle. And of course, that's because Michigan State hired away their head coach very, very late in the cycle. So Colorado, from a talent perspective and organizational perspective, still kind of behind the eight ball and catching up from all of that stuff. And I mean, they took care of business in week one, but did they really take care of business? Because they were 37.5-point favorites over Northern Colorado. And they had started the fourth quarter and it was 21-7. And they did eventually score 2 fourth quarter touchdowns, but this game was pretty competitive into the fourth quarter, and they were favored by more than 5 scores. And Nick, you talked about the quarterback situation a little bit, but when Trout, the Tennessee quarterback, transferred into Colorado, Sam Neuer, who was last year's starter, transferred out. And I read my handy Phil Steele in the offseason, and Phil basically said Neuer transferred out because he saw the writing on the wall that he wasn't going to be good enough to start at Colorado with Stroud there. So now you're talking about with Stroud out and Neuer gone and Lewis there, he was the backup to the guy that wasn't going to be good enough. So that tells you where Colorado is at quarterback right now. He threw for 102 yards and 6.8 yards per attempt against Northern Colorado. The thing is that the Buffs ran the ball almost 61% of the time last year. So, and they ran 49 times and for 281 yards against Northern Colorado. So from a game plan perspective, they like to run. They even like their quarterback to run a little bit. So how does that play into this matchup? Well, you have Texas A&M recruiting at a top 10 level now under Jimbo Fisher. And they're also getting back Michael Clemens, a defensive end who wasn't in the lineup week one. And Kent State did manage to run for 5 yards per carry last week, but Kent State is a tempo offense. They throw the ball, they run the ball, they're very scheme forward in terms of what they bring to the table. I would not expect the same thing from Colorado. So because Kent State had some success, I think it only strengthens probably Colorado's resolve to run the ball early and often in this game. And I'm just not so sure that running into this Texas A&M defense between the tackles over and over again and not being a threat to throw the ball at all and not running tempo is really going to be a recipe for success against this Jimbo Fisher defense. So we did see Texas A&M throw 4 interceptions last week, not 2, not 3, 4 different times interceptions. And, you know, you see Nick Saban riding every single player in Alabama's entire roster. I saw him go on another rant yesterday heading into Mercer. Well, Jimbo Fisher doesn't quite have that level of hatred for every single player on his roster every week, but he does give that level of vitriol to one position, and that's quarterback. So I would expect him to be riding Hans King every day, all week. And I would expect at least a little improvement from King going into Colorado this week. And honestly, if he doesn't make mistakes in terms of throwing interceptions, then Texas A&M's got a pretty good team on offense. Now, their offensive line is a question mark when you go against the Alabamas of the world, but against Colorado, they ought to be able to do some damage if you can just avoid those same interceptions. So, Nick, why don't you tell us how you think you're going to get to the betting window on this game?
Well, the thing that I like the most out of this game is Texas A&M minus 17. For a lot of the reasons you just went over, I feel like you've got a much more talented team on the Aggie sideline, and a game plan from a Colorado standpoint without the quarterback necessary to throw the ball down the field. I just don't see how Colorado matches up against that Texas A&M front and runs the ball with authority to the point where they're going to cover this spread. So I feel like Texas A&M will score plenty of points, and we're going to cover that 17. And to that point, I'm much less bullish about the over/under, but I do like A&M to score enough points to get over 50.5. So give me Texas A&M and give me the over. How about you?
I'll also go with Texas A&M minus 17, but I'm taking the under 50.5 in this game. We've already talked about what we expect from the Colorado offense, but I think last week was a little bit of a misleading game. If you look at Texas A&M, and they scored in the 40s, and also they were throwing the ball a decent amount in the second half with a pretty big lead, which is not normal for Jimbo Fisher. I think part of it is he really wanted to get King a lot of reps and kind of break him in before SEC play. And I think we'll see a little bit more conservative approach in this game. Colorado is not going to run at nearly the tempo and pace that Kent State did. And I also think that Colorado actually poses less of a threat offensively than Kent State did last week. So I think we'll see Texas A&M shut it down a little bit earlier than they did last week. I think they'll probably run the ball a little bit more in the second half, and the game will be played at a much slower pace. So I'll take Texas A&M minus 17 and then also take under 50.5. For Nick Cole, I'm Christopher Smith from SEC 14. Make sure to smash that subscribe button and watch all our videos as we break down every SEC game from a betting standpoint. But hopefully we'll get you a cash. One of us will get you a couple cashes this weekend, and we will talk to you all next week.